Today's workshop is part of the third series of the series on sustainability that we initiated. These workshops are to address basically architects, builders, students of design, and more of you in the construction industry to be able to see if we could bring about a change altogether. And that is the only agenda we have. I have been very passionate about building design that's very closely knit into nature, but I also enjoy the urban world and the immense opportunities it offers. And therefore, in this dilemma, I have found a kind of a balance as a professional. And I would like to walk you through all the possibilities you could see through the construction industry. Today, of course, we are discussing filler slabs specifically and how, what, where, of the same. So I am Lavanya Goradia for all of you that don't know me. I am a practicing architect since 2001. I also co-own Studio Alia Projects Private Limited, and our mission in our practice in Studio Alia has been around sustainable design practices, where we design buildings that are closer to nature, even if they are in the cities. Saranya is our co-host today for the meeting, and most of you have already communicated with her and seen her beautiful profile pic on her phone. She is an architect and practicing with us at Studio Alia, and she's also helping me out for this workshop. So thank you, Saranya. If you could just say a quick hi. Thanks, Saranya. So are we all ready? Saranya? So here we go. I'll be sharing the presentation today in two parts. One is an introduction to why of this conversation on sustainability, just touching up on the old stuff quickly. And then the second part is the what, where, and the how about the filler slabs as a specific alternative construction techniques for the roofing system. I'm going to initiate sharing the presentation. To give me a moment, and there we go. So after I'm done with this presentation, I'll be more than happy to answer several questions. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please just jot it down in the chat room. Saranya will make a note. In fact, I'll be most happy if you post the question and we could discuss it. So I'm just going to brief up, and this is a repeat of some of the slides of our previous presentations. Apparently, building and the construction industry, they contribute to 36% of the global energy use and 39% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions naturally. And that is what the United Nations Environmental Programme says. Construction industry in India generates about 10 to 12 tons of waste annually. At the same time, as per the government of India, the construction sector contributes to 9% of the GDP and employs more than 44 million workers, becoming the second largest employing industry in India since 2017, and only more now. And we can see how it has affected, this pandemic has affected the construction industry so drastically for the right reasons. It also is in the place or position to enable workers move up the skill and the income ladder. And that is also the dilemma because of which one needs to relook at what this industry can do. And because we are also responsible for all this pollution, and we are also responsible for all this that we're bringing as added value to the community, there needs to be some sort of a change in innovation in the construction industry is what we believe to reach more sustainable solutions. We came up with this very quickly, and this is what we follow, and this is what we profess that most designers do as well. We came up with the short form RALIS, which is RALIS, and yeah, it could be RAILS, Rails as well. We say that rethink in terms of minimizing, look at requirements all over again. Do you really need this or need that? That's the best way to initiate anything in the construction design world. Bring in sensitivity in terms of climate sensitivity. That just helps furthermore to reduce energy usage and makes it so much easier to live the lives that we do. Let's be advised by our traditions and innovate from there. We don't have to be going back, don't have to be regressive, but we can move further and re-innovate by just taking some information from the traditions. Just like Narendra Modi says, let's look at local materials and techniques. And we thought of it before he did, by the way. And let's include local skills people and craftsmen, because there are so many of them that are deprived of being able to utilize their skill set to the maximum. And if the design industry was able to support these, it could bring such a beautiful collaborative change in the economy, in the economical scenario that we are in right now. Sustainability needs to look at it from that perspective as well. So the question is, what is it that I can do? Right? All of us want to know, oh yeah, all this is going on. What is it that I can do? I don't know what to do and what not to do. And therefore we are here to answer some of your questions and have invited you to be a part of the sustainable movement. The idea is for not us to keep our knowledge to ourselves, but to be able to have more people be informed and pass this on along. So how? How is it that we can bring the change? Is by choosing alternative construction techniques. If the construction industry is responsible for such a lot of such huge energy consumption, not only in the building itself, but the way the buildings run as well, an alternative attitude to construction is really the key that might bring about a mass level change. And the more of us involved in it, the more the change will be. So today we are discussing filler slabs, and the reason we are doing this because a lot of you who attended our previous workshops have specifically asked about filler slabs, how to go about them, because slabs are already so familiar. And we realize that the filler slab is just a little tweak of a change in that slab. And how is it that you can go about it? Because then that is not so unfamiliar to the craftsmen or what we call as a labor community as well. It's just a small little change from what they're used to doing. But what are the benefits of it and how is it that you can go about it? Because most of us are unfamiliar. Even structural engineers we have experienced. Our Guru Prasad is here today. He's been designing our buildings for more than a decade and a half now. And he also seemed to have, because the education industry doesn't teach you that, doesn't teach you alternative because it doesn't feed the economy that way. But I'm talking about the corporate-based economy. Anyways, I'll move on from here. So these are the 3 points that I'm going to touch up right now. Number one, what are filler slabs? Number two, where can I use these filler slabs? So a lot of you have asked those questions. And how do I design them? Simple. And we're going to make it really simple for you. The how is going to be again split into 3. And let me go ahead with that. So what are filler slabs? Anybody recognize this gentleman? You could just unmute yourself and say if you do. No?
Laurie Baker.
Laurie Baker.
Super. Everybody knows it. Super. So this is Laurie Baker. And Laurie Baker came up with a lot of alternative construction techniques when he decided to settle in Kerala and look at construction from a whole different perspective. And we have to say that the filler slab is a technique that he innovated. And then it was supported by HUDCO in New Delhi, and they took it forward as a technology that has become more prevalent now. This is the sketch that he had made then, and we shall explain it in more detail. The idea of the filler slab came about from 2 things. One is that he didn't see the purpose of using so much material. And the second, there were a lot of these waste Mangalore tiles around, and he didn't see the reason for wasting them. And this is some of the ways his buildings ended up looking. Filler slabs are done in several ways. And we'd like to show you or tell you of the benefits of them. Some of you are already familiar with them and some of you might want to re-note that. There are 3 specific benefits to doing filler slabs. One, it reduces reinforcement steel drastically. And what I mean by that is that in your regular construction or a regular slab that you would cast, you would have your steel distributed at every 6 or 7 inches. But in this kind of a slab system, you would end up having double the distance because the unit ends up occupying a larger space, which is of the filler material, and the spacing becomes double of what otherwise you would have done, because of which the steel gets halved. And of course, the embodied energy of steel is pretty high. And we are looking at reducing the embodied energy of steel and concrete, considering these are the largest embodied energy materials that you end up designing or building with. Not talking of cost though, cost included. The second aspect that it works with is that it reduces the concrete to half the quantity, because the bottom layer is occupied by a filler material, and the rest of the slab, which is half the thickness of a regular 6-inch or 5-inch slab, is concrete. So it reduces the concrete quantity to half. Again, helps in reducing the embodied energy which concrete brings into a building, which is usually the largest of a building. And then the third very important aspect is, of course, thermal insulation that it brings on. And because it has these air gaps and a lighter material that is included into the slab, it is much easier, because air being a great insulator or a bad conductor of heat, it helps in keeping the roof cooler. And therefore, you will see a huge difference in the temperature between outside and inside if the roof slabs are used properly. So with all these benefits, it doesn't make sense to not use filler slabs, of course. They do look a little different. Now, this thermal insulation helps to bring down the energy quotient of the usage of energy of the building itself. So it's another thing of looking at alternative forms of energy. That is, of course, the way one should go. But also look at how is it that you reduce the consumption in the first place. And if I'm able to reduce the consumption, the use of the alternative would also automatically reduce, and that would pinch me lesser irrespective of which source it was. And the roof being the highest absorber of heat, it needs to be looked at very sensitively as to what you're doing to be able to reduce the impact of the sink, the heat sinks as we call them, the roof being the biggest heat sinks, being able to reduce that to as much as possible. The filler slab is based on a very simple principle, because a lot of you will be like, how does this even work, right? And this is again something Laurie Baker shared, that the upper part of the slab is subjected to a compressive force, and then the lower part of the slab to a tensile force. So all of us who went to design school and to engineering school, we understand this. Those of you who don't, write the question down, I will try to help. So because the compressive, because of the tensile, the part of the bottom takes on the tensile forces, you're able, when you replace it with something void or lesser, you end up bringing down the load of the slab itself to quite lesser, bringing it down to quite a little. And then I'll move on, because I will be touching upon the structural part as we get in further. Where is it that I can use these filler slabs? Very simple answer again. Any kind of slab can be used, which is simply supported ideally, can be a filler slab. But even cantilever slab, like we have attempted before, like this slab is a cantilever slab that is of course supported on one side by a column and on the other side by a beam. All of these slabs can be treated, any kind of a slab, something that is bridged like that, is independently floating, all of them can be treated as a filler slab. We ended up using all the Mangalore tiles from an old building which were already broken and damaged into a slab of the building in the same property as a filler material, to be able to reduce again the amount of concrete that went in, and as well as bringing in a whole different aesthetic, besides the fact that we wanted to ensure that it was also kept cool, because this is in Gujarat and it really gets hot in Gujarat in the summers. So more images of what filler slabs end up being like. So the next question is, how do I go about designing them, right? And this question I'd like to answer in 3 different sections. One is aesthetically, because as designers, the aesthetics are a very key aspect to us. Second being structurally, and the third in terms of execution, because it is one thing to be able to have an expectation of an aesthetic, and the second thing to be able to get that as an outcome when you end up executing it, because there are challenges. And structurally, of course, with not enough structural engineers familiar with these systems, architects and designers like yourselves need to know the basics of it so that there is some sort of a knowledge that you can bring on board and assist your structural engineers to be able to design some. We're not saying that they're useless. Sorry, Prasad, I didn't mean that. So the number one thing about aesthetically, you can replace the bottom part, which is the tensile part of the part of the slab that is designed for tensile forces, with several different materials. So several different terracotta tiles of various sorts. So from a Mangalore tiles, which have been a waste, you can sandwich them to be able to get a certain height. The idea is that you want your tile to be at least the material that you put in to be anything from 2 to 2.5 inches high, because you want to take up half the height of the slab as a filler material, as a material that is lighter in weight. So you see that there are these hoodie blocks which are available in the market, which I shared the images of earlier. These are, I'm sorry, I have to go back. These are Mangalore tiles, and these Mangalore tiles will be sandwiched and placed. We'll show you a section of that. And these are hoodie blocks, which are again a cross section, which it's a tapered cross section, and it's hollow inside. And these are available in Bangalore and Kerala. These hoodie blocks allow for an air gap to sit, and it's about 2.5 inches in height. So when I look at the kind of materials I can use for the filler slab, I look at different kind of terracotta tiles, and you can play a lot because we've played with a lot of options, and I'll show you some now. Plastic waste, several types of plastic waste, from plastic bottles which are filled to keyboards and sandwiched with thermocol, which is a waste that does not have another purpose to be, to coconut shells. You've seen Wallpaper's beautiful work and how they have been able to use such creative ways of showcasing coconut shells as a filler slab. And as far and wide your creativity can go, because aren't you really bored of the typical RCC slabs? I am. This is one of the slabs that I did at the absolute initial practice of mine in Bangalore. And I was so amused to find this hoodie block, which looks like so from the bottom, but on the top it is hollow inside. And it's designed specifically for a filler slab. I was like, wow, Bangalore is so advanced. Because in Gujarat, with the first building I attempted doing, I had to run around, find a Mangalore tile guy, because we don't have a lot of houses with Mangalore tile roofs there, and then sat and then ensured that they fit properly and set them into a certain space. When you have to arrange it on the slab, you have to arrange it properly on the scaffolding material. But these are tiles that are already available here, which is pretty fabulous. You have to work so much less hard. But in Pune, when I attempted this in Pune, because Pune doesn't have a material like that, I ended up finding these square terracotta tiles, and then I had to sandwich another little matka on top of it to be able to get the insulation and get that height that I was seeking. I had to do all that play off, but it still was a very interesting experience. And then you can have all these matkas that you can use, again, bring value to the lives of the potters in that sense. The Mangalore tiles, the sandwich Mangalore tiles, they look very interesting. And of course, Laurie Baker's work is all out there. Look at how Wallpaper has used so creatively the coconut shells and brought in such a lot of artistic, feel to something that could have been so ordinary and plain. And then this is Biome's work, where they used keyboards from a neighbor who had discarded them. He was somebody who repaired computers, and they had all these discarded keyboards, and they sandwiched thermocol, because thermocol is again a waste, like I mentioned before, that doesn't have another purpose and does not go back into nature for years and years and years and years. So it's great because it has an air gap and it can become a great insulator. So it is really up to you as to aesthetically what you choose, and what is it that you want to convey as a designer, that you would choose the material to use it as a filler. Structurally speaking, this has kind of simplified. And this is a sketch by Laurie Baker himself, for example. This is what he used to do, and he professed doing, is that you stick the Mangalore tiles, not stick, but you place the Mangalore tiles on each other in exact reverse way, in a manner that you end up having these voids, an air void. And the steel arrives only in between, because this is the tensile part, right? So the steel arrives only at these points, and he used to use only 8 mm and 6 mm bars. Of course, over time, we have kind of allowed ourselves to use a little more material, but about 37 to 30 to 45 centimeters variation in size based on what is the size of the tile, you can really halve or less than halve the steel and make it so much easier. And if you look at Laurie Baker's work, he has played with creativity so much. He has used a lot of forms and turns and levels to his roof as well. Hasn't really limited himself to just one type of flat roof. This is how we did the roofs in Pune when we did the project there. And all we used is these 10 mm bars in both directions, and ended up having the sandwiched Mangalore tile. These are Mangalore tiles that a neighbor had decided to discard, and they didn't have another purpose to serve, because once they go out of that, they don't have the same size. The purlins are decided by a certain size, and they had to redo their roof, and the old sizes were not available, so they had these lying around. So we ended up using them for building this roof. How it happens structurally is this way, that you have all this. This is your typical solid RCC slab, for example, which would have the steel reinforcement and the concrete that you pour, and the slab would be anything from 5 to 5.5 to 6 inches in thickness, right? But it's this bottom part that you can replace with something that is less in weight, so that the self load of the slab itself comes down, and this steel can be made lesser. And that is what these Mangalore tiles and filler materials could be. And it's just that and nothing else. A lot of us have mistaken these kind of roof slabs to act like a waffle slab, and therefore end up making or treating this into a beam, small little tiny beams, and increasing the quantity of cement and concrete and steel that goes, the steel that goes into it a lot more, which isn't necessary. In terms of execution, we found that if the aesthetics are the key, then the execution techniques have to be very clean and very tidy, because the outcome needed to be very nice. Because unless the outcome is beautiful, nobody is buying it, right? And this is what we as an office end up doing. We end up treating, so there's a technique called mud centering, and of course mud centering per se is very challenging now in the urban times, where everybody wants everything extremely fast. So we use a regular centering sheet. We do a layer of, what we call as a little slurry of cement slurry on top of an earth layer. And on that, we put a lot of, cow dung, and then end up placing our tiles on it. And then is when the reinforcement comes into play. You could also do it this way. You could do it part and parts, especially when you're working with the sandwiched Mangalore tile. It is very easy to damage them. So you could start placing them and start concreting them and coming ahead. In this case, we ended up using a nice shuttering ply, because that also gives you a nice clean soffit. So that could also be a good option. And the choice is really yours, depending on what is it that you want below. I always suit the example of an upside down cake. So as nicely as you decorate and as clean as you make the bottom of the cake is how well it will turn out when you turn it over. This is the layout that we did for this project of ours, where we use these terracotta pots, and you see that this is the cow dung layer on top of the last cement slurry that we have put on top of the sheets. And then we put these pots on it, place the reinforcement, do the electrical work, and you concrete them. One more view of what this ends up looking like when you just place them in place. Just a little concrete slurry a cement slurry to ensure that they don't move. And you see that this is sitting on a board, a typical board. And then that's what it is from below. You remove the cow dung, and you can end up getting a clean slab like that. And that's essentially it. This is what a regular RCC slab ends up being like. right? You end up having steel at every 6 inches and 7 inches center to center distance, electrical work and wear off. And then it looks also very plain. But this is what your filler slabs can look like. And they can bring a little aesthetic change. And you can play with different materials and have a little fun while you're doing what you're doing. Again, we see that this is all different materials that we've played with, the sandwich keyboards. And there are, of course, many, many, many more examples of some amazing works done by so many amazing architects. And there is, of course, Anil Lal. I cannot be not mentioning him and the beautiful work that he has done done around the world. I mean, it's amazing. These are some of the takeaways that I see. Any kind of slab can be used as a filler slab. All right, this is one. Lots of aesthetics that you get to play with as vis-a-vis a regular concrete slab. So you get to play with as an architect, as a designer as well. You don't have to have the same little boring looking slab. It reduces the roof's carbon footprint a whole lot, which is important in the times we live in because the carbon emissions are mattering. We like it or we don't. It reduces the amount of steel and concrete because it's not just the carbon emission that the steel and the concrete bring along. There is also a monetary aspect to it. And the question is that who do you want to give the money to? To the people or to the vendor merchants? So who is it that the monies go to when you buy more of steel and concrete? It makes it more labor centric. So it does help the social economy. And that is one of the differences that we see. The kind of material that is used for making these, the earth that is used for making these blocks as well is far lesser than a brick per se. So you look at it from many, many perspectives. It uses waste and lightweight materials. And then of course it adds thermal comfort. And with all these advantages, why not? And I'd like to end this with the line I've repeated all this time. I cannot do all the good that the earth needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do. So what good would you like to begin with? What's next? Stay tuned for upcoming workshops. Our website is studioala.co. And on their Instagram handle, which is studioala_PROJ, is where we end up publishing about the upcoming workshops. They're usually on a Wednesday, alternate Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. You can unmute and maybe ask questions.
Akshay has a question.
Yes, Akshay.
Hi, ma'am. Cost-wise, like, is it same or as compared to RCC slab or is it?
So I know the cost is important. Cost-wise, it is not a whole lot different. So I would not like to lie to you and tell you, oh, it's a huge difference in cost. Of course, it depends on what kind of an aesthetic you are seeking. So if you are, there is some sort of a background noise that I'm not able to, So there is not a whole lot of a cost difference, but there is one because the steel is a big quotient that reduces in the cost aspect. So when you look at, if you're looking at about 2.5 kilos per square foot for steel, then you're looking at 1.5 to about 1.7 per square foot. So that itself is a huge quotient in terms of cost. Labor-wise, it's a little more intensive in cost, but otherwise, steel-wise, it is cheaper. So we have seen a big offset in the past. But I would not want people to choose it just for that reason. Actually, you have to come back on. Okay, cool.
Purnima also has a question.
Yes, Purnima.
Okay. Yeah, hi. Can it be used as an intermediate slab also, or only at the roof it can be used?
Any roof that you want at any level, it could be used as. Of course, in my case, I am personally promoting a slab, a complete slab. You would have to kind of look at it aesthetically as well. You want to place your fans and your lights very strategically based on the positioning of whatever, but you can even do a part of the slab and not to do the whole. You can play. But any slab for that matter. only that the play will not really, advantage you a whole lot monetarily, because then structurally it becomes a little more complex. But you can, any slab. I remember Guru Prasad, once he had done our first filler slab for us, he actually kept calling me every few months, "Ma'am, is this roof still standing? Is it okay? Because I've never done this before." So you can still do it. It doesn't matter. And the buildings are very well standing. It's been more than a decade and a half now.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Lavanya, when we place two blocks next to each other, Sindhu here.
Okay, Sindhu. Yeah.
Okay, we placed two blocks next to each other. Okay. Generally, what happens? There will be small gap between the two blocks. There are chances of concrete getting
through that.
Yeah, through that. How to manage that?
So that's exactly what we did. Like, if I don't know how many of you are into cooking, but I enjoy a good pineapple upside down cake. So what I do is I sprinkle the bottom with a lot of sugar, and I place my pineapples very carefully there. And then intermediate spots I end up filling it with either cherries or with walnuts. Okay. And then I make sure that I put enough sugar that when I do pour the batter, the sugar doesn't move. So what we do exactly the flip here, because if you remember seeing that image I explained when I was discussing the execution, on the centering sheet, you end up putting a layer of earth, do a flat cement slurry, and then put cow dung on it so that nothing gets inside those voids. The voids might not be perfect because these tiles are handmade, so you can't really avoid that. And then you might want to fill in with a little terracotta colored, oxide material inside.
Yeah, that's what we have to do.
Yeah, so ideally you don't want to just dump concrete, just sit directly on concrete. You want to create a bottom for it so that it looks pretty. Well, that is because aesthetics is key to me, to whoever it matters.
Yeah. Okay.
Chandrika, you have any question? तू है कि गई?
यहीं पे हूँ कहाँ जाऊंगी मैं? Thanks to these webinars that I don't have to fly down to Bangalore to take gyan from you.
You most welcome.
Hi, Lavanya. I have a question.
Yes, please ask.
Yeah. So, how much will be the weight, the reduction?
In half the load.
Half of it, no?
Because if you have a 5.5-6 inches of the roof, then half of it is being taken away by this filler material. So if it is half, then obviously the load is half. And anyways, you're putting half the steel. So
yeah, half a steel. So
Lavanya, I'm going to ask something.
Who is asking this?
Me, Chandrika.
Chandrika. Puch.
Okay. So one of the questions the team has here is that for flat slabs and for large construction civil projects, commercial projects, would these slabs work?
They would. In fact, they would be a great way to do it, because when I was in Pune, what I observed was that they ended up doing fly ash bricks. And fly ash bricks is what they used to sandwich inside. So you do a layer of a slurry of concrete and start placing the blocks quickly on it. And then so you can do a sandwich thing where you don't end up having to see the bottom completely.
Yeah.
Do a thin layer of slurry, concrete slurry. I'm not talking of the cement slurry. I'm saying concrete slurry. Quickly place the blocks over it, the filler blocks over it, and then do another concrete. But at a commercial level, to handle all that detailing and that labor-intensive work is a whole different ballgame. So I don't know who would be willing to work at that level.
And also then the seismic loads and the seismic calculation, the loads for those buildings.
So the minute that the roof is lesser in weight, would the building not be less loaded?
Self-weight of the building, but when we're doing our load calculations of the structural things required, how does one go about that? Because this on a small slab, say 3 meter by 3 meter room.
I would only logically say, because I'm not a structural engineer, but I would only logically say that in that sense, you would assume half the load of your slab.
No, load of slab, but the load on the slab, they're calculating all that.
That is live load. That is anyways the live load. That's not going to change. That may be the similar thing everywhere, right? And live load is much lesser. Your slabs, if you go back to school, The slabs are designed for the dead load, not largely for their own self dead load rather than the live load.
Yeah.
The live load is a much smaller quotient in the calculation.
Okay.
Lavanya, this is Ajay. Just to go back to this, the base preparation that we were talking about.
Yes.
Now, if I'm using, let's say, a hoodie block or even the Mangalore tiles, and I want to see the bottom, as nicely as possible after casting. So when you say that you do a cement slurry at the base, you said you would typically do an earth, like a slight mud layer, then a cement slurry on top, and then cow dung on top, right?
Yes.
And only after that you would place the block on the cow dung.
Yes.
So that the purpose of this, if I'm understanding correctly, is to prevent the block from moving while you're casting.
Not just that, but also for everything to come off easily later and not have things sticking into it. Santosh, why don't you come online and talk? Santosh
So effectively, you're saying that the cow dung layer, which is right on top, once you cast the slab, you just wash it from below and everything comes off, and you see
much easier for it to come off. Yes.
Okay. And the other alternate you said is that you can also use a shuttering sheet, apply shuttering sheet, and then place.
Yes. But I have personally not found the finishing very good in spite of the shuttering sheet.
Right.
So
because you have a gap between the blocks, right? So cement slurry would sort of squeeze in from those gaps and go underneath.
Yes. So having done that before, we found this really, this is a method that has worked the best for us. And the more work you put into the preparation of the base, the less work you have to put into the end product finishing. The lesser effort to put initially in the preparation of the base, the more work you will end up having to put in trying to doing the end finishing.
Correct. So again, just to understand, what is the purpose of that cement layer above the mud? Is that just to create a level?
I want to get a really nice flat level, right?
Okay.
That is the intention of it.
Right.
And earth, we are using soil and, in Bangalore, we have quarry dust. So we use a mixture of that to be able to get the base, one base.
Right.
Then the cement slurry is to kind of get it a nice one level done, And then on top of it, the cow dung. If you want to miss out on the cement slurry, we could also just do a cow dung slurry and try it out. I would be open to it. Even a mud, you don't have to have just cement. It could be a lime-based thing, anything. But why would you, spend so much effort and money on lime, because lime is more expensive. But it's a very thin layering.
Okay.
But it does take up a little bit of, it's quite a bit of a thickness, and the earth has the tendency to get stuck to the material. So you cannot have the soil directly under, because if it rains and it is pouring, then these materials are going to stick to each other, and that's going to be enough.
Right. So that's where the cow dung.
So the cement and the cow dung are the earth and the cow dung are separated by the cement.
Right.
That.
Interesting.
This is only over years of making mistakes that we learned that this is probably the better thing that works.
Right.
But how about getting cow dung? It's a difficult task, right?
That's not a question I can answer. I'm sorry about that. But you can try any kind of an oil in that case. That could also work. Just like they oil the sheets otherwise. Steel sheets are oiled, but I don't think that oil ends up working very well with the cement surface, is a reason that and it is not that difficult, especially where we seem to be sourcing it ever so often. So, as in an office, we build as well, right? So we source it pretty easily. It's just a matter of doing it the first time. The second time and third time, it becomes very easy.
Okay, I had a question.
Yes, Manjunath.
Manjunath here. How do you ensure proper packing of concrete in between all those spots? There are very less gaps. There might be honeycombing later, right? So how do you avoid that?
You don't see them in most cases.
Okay.
In most cases, you don't. In the case where you're leaving a gap or leaving a void, also we have not seen the possibility of honeycombing, because that's when the material goes and parks very nicely around it. When you end up using a huge amount of heavy steel is when we have observed that the issue of honeycombing has occurred often. When the amount of material in terms of steel usability is lesser, you seem to have lesser issues with honeycombing. Because anyways, you're using a little vibrator here or there. And you don't need it because it's only 2 inches thick.
2 inches.
Concrete.
Right. And on top of how big is this, the pots or the blocks, whatever you use, is it 2 to 3 inches?
That's what I said. It's about 2.5 inches.
2.5 inches.
Karan, if you could quickly have somebody get me one, it'd be very nice. We may have one in the office.
Okay. So on top of the blocks, you're going to put the concrete, right?
Yes.
And how are you going to ram it?
You don't ram it. It's concrete, right? It pours.
Yeah. Okay, it pours. Okay. So workability should be,
It is pretty easy.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. So if we find a flat pillar slab instead of a mangrove tiles,
Sunil, very difficult to understand what you're saying. There's a problem with the audibility.
Okay, this one desktop, so I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, but there's a lot of echo.
Okay.
So Saran is just quickly showing the hoodie block. Saran, you want to turn it around in the other direction? Yes. No, ulta. And what you see on the bottom is exactly the reverse. Yeah. Oh. Saranya, that's the bottom. Can you show the cross section with the part that is on the bottom Yes. Thank you very much. So that's what the cross section, what Saranya is showing us. Saranya, leave it alone. Let people look at it because it takes them a little while to figure who you are in the screen. Yeah. So that is what the cross section ends up looking like of the hoodie block. And as you see, it has got voids in it. And when 2 hoodie blocks sit next to each other, it actually becomes very easy for them to just sit next to each other. And you
What's the gap between the 2 hoodie blocks? Would it be just a few in this case?
2, there is not even, I mean, you can kiss them, you can leave a gap. That is a design aspect.
Okay. But I can technically have them touching together, and the V actually helps me to put the rod in that.
Exactly. So what I was amused by that in this part of the country, somebody already came up with a tile that replaced anything else. So just something that is ready for this.
Right.
Yeah, you don't get that in all parts of the country. But you don't have to limit yourself with a hoodie block though. Yes, Neha. And yes. Sorry?
Cost.
I think it's about 25 rupees. Is that right, Praveen? Praveen's not answering. Yeah, it's about 25 rupees.
Lavanya, I have another question.
Yes, Saranya, thank you. Yes, Deepika.
See, in case when you're keeping the hoodie blocks apart, like say about I give an inch or 2 inches apart, what about cover, where the reinforcement is sitting? What about the cover? Do you keep cover blocks?
You do want a cover, no? Then you want a cover.
Yeah, but I didn't see it in any of the images, so I was
because we haven't kept a lot of gap. So the reason that I don't end up keeping the voids at the gap is because it becomes more difficult to finish them afterwards.
Absolutely, that is one thing I noticed in any of your images, that no block cover.
Because that's the mistake I had done with my first project.
I know why even I have done the same. But the thing is, maybe I was thinking that that slurry and that mud plaster, what you do, maybe that will take care of the cover. I was thinking, but it can't take care of the cover, I'm sure.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, I'm mistaken. I think the hoodie blocks have gone from 23 rupees to 41 rupees already. Yes.
Okay. Lavanya.
Yes, Purnima.
Lavanya, Lavanya, when we use these hoodie blocks, the concrete, I think somebody else also asked this question of the concrete, like it's at a wedge. The concrete doesn't pour in.
That's all. When it has to sit in the wedge, no, it's a good thing. And then even if it pours in, you can chip off a little. It doesn't come out a whole lot. So about a mm or 2 of a gap is there. So you can basically take it off and then you fill in the space with a little red oxide based material.
No, I'm not saying at the finished level. I'm saying when you're pouring concrete over it.
It does ooze out, but not a whole lot.
I think she means maybe the concrete going into the voids of the block.
Side. Yeah, exactly.
Horizontally.
Yeah, no, yes. The wedges. I mean, looking at the hoodie block, it's at a wedge.
Yes.
It's at a wedge.
Yes.
It doesn't flow in like that, is my question.
It does maybe flow in a little, but because the concrete is not extremely watery, there is only so long that it can go.
Okay. Yeah.
It's good because we want the materials to kind of be cohesive, right? We don't want the tile to be separate from the concrete and then just drop off. Because those are the kind of questions that have been asked in the past. Doesn't the tile just come and drop off on its own?
No. I'm not worried about dropping.
No, but it doesn't ooze. So it doesn't really ooze out a whole lot. But I have never had to break a roof to figure that out also. So I have never had to see it.
No. I don't intend you ever break also.
No, but in the sense that the only way to know is when you break the roof, that how deep it oozed in, right?
Maybe for the reconstruction you will.
Maybe one day. So far we've not had to.
My question is, can you hear me, Lavanya?
Yes, who is
Aparna.
this? Okay,
Aparna. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we put a matka for 2.5 inches and above that we are pouring the concrete, the weight of the concrete, because terracotta being very brittle, will it break or something?
It's again very little concrete and the weight of the concrete is not that high. It's about a couple of inches.
So it can sustain that much of...
It has sustained all this time. Yeah. It works quite fine.
Yeah, right. All right.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deepak?
Yeah. In Pune, madam, what they do, they bring all concrete at that roof level. They take it into a cart, and that cart goes with the track where they want to pour the concrete.
Everywhere it goes the same way.
Correct. So while moving that cart, it is a very heavy cart. So those filler material get break at that time, or
so the hoodie blocks don't seem to. Okay, so each material will need a little different sensitivity. If you observed, when I was talking about execution, I mentioned it, that for the sandwich Mangalore tile that you're using, you want to place them as you go along and not all at a go. Okay, you can't just place them and just pour the concrete. In comparison, the hoodie block is working very well because it's scientifically designed. It has a trapezoidal triangular shape. So if you remember from your school days, that triangle is a very stable form. It doesn't seem to, and then because it's a whole tile of that sort, it seems to sustain that kind of a live load better, if that is what Chandrika was wanting to know. But that kind of movement, it seems to sustain better.
One more thing in Pune, what if we go for any structure, the structural engineer has to give a certificate that he accepts this structure is stable. So, do you had any experience? Any structural engineer refused to give such kind of certificate or something?
Well, again, as I said, Guru Prasad is here on the call. I don't know why he's not unmuting himself, but you can ask him if he would certify a building like that.
Okay.
So far he has been okay. He's like, ma'am, as long as you're okay with it, I will also be okay with it. So at some point you need to be sufficiently convinced and of surety for the opposite person also to want to take it. And over time, I mean, Pune has some structural engineers who are more than willing to go out of their way for alternative design and structure. So you should not have any challenges with that at all.
All right.
Darshil has been raising his hands endlessly. Darshil? Or it's just by mistake. Okay. Chandu has a question. Would you want to pose it, Chandu? Venkatesh, would you want to ask the question yourself? Filler materials come in different sizes. So how does this affect the steel placement? Is that right?
Yeah, hi Lavanya ma'am, this is Venkatesh.
Hi Venkatesh.
Yeah, my question was like, how did you go about choosing the material for any particular site based on like the size of the slab, or what is like in close proximity, or something that is cost efficient? How do we usually, choose the filler material or the thickness that you desired?
I have mentioned this earlier. Always start with what is locally available. Always begin that way. This is available locally, therefore this is easier for us to do, and therefore we will execute it like so. So in Pune, we did not have a hoodie block. Somebody had this discarded Mangalore tiles, so we ended up using those for a roof. Then the next roof, we did not have the same Mangalore tiles available, so we had to go around into the market looking for other alternative materials. Client did not want a surface that would have any cobwebs or something, so we had to come up with another idea of being able to marry two different terracotta-based materials. In a school that we were doing, the client was open to the idea of using keyboards sandwiched with thermocol. So we did that. So each place, each space will guide you and look at what is locally available first. And after you have found what all is available at the cost prices that they are available with, then make a very informed decision on how you want to use it.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it has to be cost-wise also viable.
Yeah. Yeah.
The minute you will import something from somewhere, it is going to hurt you.
True. Correct. Yeah. And the other question was, which was probably your most challenging, or something that is something that you love doing. Which material that was very close to you when you started doing it?
Me?
Yeah. I mean, just a
no. So
one question.
I think my problem is I don't like anything that I have done. I only want to be able to improvise and do something more or better. So far, what is more exciting is the idea of being able to play with more things than to consistently just work with one only.
True. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Chandu, do you want to ask? Ajay, you have a lot of questions. Do you want to ask them?
No, I think I typed in a few questions, but we've already discussed them.
Okay. I think I browsed a little.
That's not a problem.
Chandu, Chandu Sai is asking a question. Filler material coming in different sizes. How does this affect the steel placement? The steel placement is exactly in proportion and in size to the size of the filler material. So if you're working with a round module and that is about 10 inches by 10 inches, then your steel placement is at every 10 inches. If you're working with a little bigger module of 12 inches by 12 inches, the steel is at 12 inches by 12 inches. So it's as simple as that. Chandu, does that answer your question?
So basically, once you calculate your steel spacing, you work backwards to understand your diameter of rod.
Yes.
If you have a 6-inch spacing
furthermore,
versus a 12-inch spacing, so the variable here will be the diameter of the rod that you use, I guess.
Actually, ironically and interestingly, Laurie Baker went to as little as 6 mm and 8 mm. He ended up using steel at that low. None of our structural engineers today would profess that.
Right.
So, in fact, we end up going too high. We end up using 12 mm and so on. I think that is too much of a material.
Right.
You don't need so much. So, yes, if the spacing is extensively high, then yes, maybe you want to use a little more steel. But it doesn't usually become necessary. So, anyways, your tile is your hoodie block tile is about 10 inches by 14 inches or 12 by 14 inches or 10 by 12. So, your proportions are running in 6 and 10s and 12s and 20s and 14s. So, anything very bigger than that that needs a reconsideration.
Correct. Is the Mangalore tile dimension a lot smaller than a hoodie block, or is it more or less the same?
It's more or less the same. And that is how the hoodie block was invented. With the same background. Yeah.
But say you had the coconut shell, for example, which is much smaller.
Yeah, and it doesn't. So the reason I have not done it before is because it doesn't seem to serve any purpose for the reduction in the steel quantity in the process of using the coconut. It is one thing that the coconut shell cannot get decomposed. Neither can it. Does it have another place to go? Then you can utilize it as a part of it. But that is if you want to just look at the aesthetics of it. Then you can play. Because anyways, my tiles, my spacing is every 6 inches and 7 inches, and the coconut shell can easily sit in between that. So what I'm doing is only the concrete quotient is decreasing over there, but the steel isn't. And the steel is the big runner of the cost hit.
Yeah. No, my thought is that if you use coconut shells, because it's a smaller module, and you're going to end up having your steel at a closer center to center, maybe you can go with a slightly lower diameter of steel if you use coconut as compared to using a hoodie block, because there your spacing is more.
Absolutely.
Somebody would have to calculate this, of course. It's just a backward calculation.
Yes, that would still be the case. There is no doubt about that. But as vis-a-vis another filler material, you would not benefit a whole lot.
Right.
Steel-wise, you would not. But yes, you can, like you said, you could reduce the steel a whole lot more. But a lot of logic needs to go in here, because if you remember or go back to school days of learning structures, when you designed your structural slab and we were all taught how to do that, you ended up having to assume a thickness of the slab before you even arrived at the design thickness of the slab.
Right.
You cannot directly, you cannot say this is the scale of my roof and therefore this is the thickness of the slab. So you begin with a 5-inch assumption and then you arrive at 5.5 or 5.75 or 6 inches or so, right? So you take an assumption and then arrive it. So we are not technically taught to look at, from a structural engineer's perspective. I understand that we are not technically taught to look at structure from a different perspective at all. That there are these possibilities as well, and it's not something so new, because filler slabs have been around for about 5 decades now.
Right.
So which is half a century, and yet isn't prevalent in the educational system for some reason, right? And it's not because any hoodie block has failed and fallen. So what is really the reason? So so education is very corporation driven, if you have observed, because corporation feeds politics and politics feeds education, and therefore there is a ripple effect over there. So whatever feeds the corporations is what you end up learning, and then when you are educated, you go back into the system and then again feed the corporations back, right? Because you do exactly what you were taught. So this education system of alternative isn't going to be taught for the longest of time unless it starts with the change of the masses themselves wanting the change. So we don't have a system of calculation and looking at it. And you and I are, I need a structural engineers who really want to bring about this thinking change rather than you and me. Because if I have to sit around convincing them also, I don't know how to go about it, because I'm not educated as a structural engineer.
It's kind of like how homeopathy and allopathy.
Yes. We're talking of as an alternative is in fact very normal. It is actually conventional. It is the life that we're living now that is an alternative one.
Actually.
Have you also tried the sloped roof with this filler slabs?
My first roof was my mother's house, which was a sloped roof.
Okay.
With a filler slab.
Filler slab, yeah.
In fact, I had designed a filler slab roof in college itself. I wanted to be able to do filler slabs and alternative construction technology when I was in college. I was so thrilled with my climatology class. I don't know if everybody else may resonate with me. I was so thrilled.
Yes, I like the class too. Climatology.
Yeah, and I was like, this is something, I don't know why people are not logically doing this, it was that kind. So when we had to do a project where we had to study a certain project, its sciography and its climatic effects, and then redesign the same structure, I remember designing a filler slab then. And then the minute that my mother said, I'm building a house, I'm like, anybody can design a house, because I was still not educated. I had not finished architecture. But I insist that the architects did a filler slab roof. And we went about a long, rigmarole of understanding and, learning. When we did that, we did make mistakes in terms of the steel. We used up a lot more steel than we should have. But that roof is still standing.
Yeah, good. That's an experience.
Yes. Anybody else who wants to ask a question, or are we done?
Yeah. Hi, Laurie. This is Sunil here.
Hi, Sunil.
So I just wanted to, I just think. So if you find a filler slab material which has a flat surface, we can just directly place it on the centering sheet, I guess, right? That should not, you don't need to do that cow dung thing and all. So if you have a flat, so because, the site, I'm just thinking how to make things easier as well as use the filler slab material. So if you have some, because since you have grooves and the chances of the slurry getting in between them or moving, you are using that cow dung and mud thing. So if you want a flat surface filler material, so can we just directly place it on the centering sheet is my question.
Yes, the answer is yes. But you will have to work hard to finishing it later. So you can decide you want to work hard before or you want to work hard after. That's it.
What finishing it later, if it is a flat surface, what issues do you think I might get?
The only that, unfortunately, in this situation, you can only make one, and then I can explain it to you.
Okay.
Because, like I said, that I have done it enough times to have experience that the finishing does take a big hit if you take the shortest of a cut in this situation. So if the finishing is taking a hit, then you're not convincing it commercially. You're not commercially convincing. And if it is not commercially convincing, nobody's going to buy it. Right.
Okay. That's the reason I was asking you.
So you have to do some level of preparation beforehand, and therefore it is more labor-centric than it is material-centric, this technique of doing a roof. And you want to be able to do it that way, ensure that your laborers understand that this is a labor-centric job. You first have to do a lot of work in preparation. And if you did mud centering ever before, you will see that mud centering is a very laborious, slow process.
Yes,
it's a beautiful technique of doing. In fact, in my opinion, you can play with so many forms of roofs so easily without using customized formation, formwork or scaffolding of any manner. And you can, and just take it off, and everything is exactly the way you had, planned it before. So I would encourage the flow of everything in life, and not want to go super fast. Because if you want to do this super fast, you're already going the wrong train.
Okay, no problem. I understand.
Would that be all? Yes, Aishwarya.
Yeah.
Darshil ka haath upar hai. Does he want to ask or not?
Darshil.
Aishwarya, tell me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, if we substitute filler slab method instead of RCC slabs, how high can we go? Will the strength remain the same, or?
I think I'm repeating my answers. I already answered that. You can go as high as you want.
So we can actually use it instead of the unsustainable ways of RCC construction.
Yes, you can.
Okay. And ma'am, like you said that terracotta pots are used. So, can the discarded pots be used where the sizes of different pots are different?
That's a design decision you can take, dear. Okay. That's a design decision you could take. You can work with various sizes if you want to, but then don't make it so complex in the beginning. Try something simpler out so that you know what the pros and the cons are.
Okay.
Yeah. Sushant, ask the question.
Sushant, would you like to ask yourself?
Sushant is saying, have you ever tried in beam bottom? Sushant, half the people not even understand your question. So,
no, the filler slab. I'm asking, is there any possibility that we can just continue our the filler slab, that filler element in beam also? I think that would be just for aesthetic purpose.
You can, but then there you are compromising with the beam strength. So there you will need your structural engineer's agreement on it. Because if your beams are serving the purpose of distribution of load, then you do need to have a conversation with your structural engineer on it. Then maybe the depth of the beam and the details will vary. But yeah, you could. In fact, there are a lot of precast beams as well, and the filler slabs are also done in that manner. You don't have to. This is custom situ filler slab, but there is also precast filler slabs that you can do, which I have done in one of our projects, where the beams are precast, which is a material that is again available in terracotta. You just have to add a steel bar to it and precast them, lift them up, place them in place, and there are these hollow blocks that go and sit in place. That's it. You put a little screed concrete on top and you have another roof.
Okay.
So there are a lot of variations in that as well. I mean, this is just the beginning of the conversation of filler. It has gone a long, far further way than most of us even know.
Yes, actually, lately I've been reading about MC Ashar works. If you know about it, I don't know. He makes tessellations in geometry. So the tessellations are made in the pattern like you can just like one filler, you can repeat that one filler and you can make the fish out of it or some pattern.
Yeah, and they look beautiful.
With repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just thinking that we can.
Of course, I taught you about it, by the way. Hello. How can you tell me if you remember?
No, I was trying to make you remember about MC Asia, not about tessellation and everything.
Achha.
The MC Asia.
Okay, so that's what I introduced you to. That's how you made the fish skylight, my dear.
Yes.
Because I introduced you to Esha's work.
Oh, wow. Actually, I forgot about MC Asia, and then I read about it, and then I'm thinking that.
And you designed that the skylight that became so famous. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I think I can repeat it in Filler Slab also.
You
so
can.
One day I'll send you the photo of it.
You can play.
Yes, I can play. Right.
Super.
Naren wants to know, do we require a skilled labor to do this, or a normal mason would do it?
Everybody is normal to begin with, who can become skilled over time. So you just have to train them a little. Everybody is on mute. Yeah.
Chandu had raised his hand. Would you like to ask something, Chandu?
I have a friend visiting, excuse me. He comes to see me every day at 4:15.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think, ma'am, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Lavanya.
It was a wonderful session. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Lavanya,
Yes,
just thinking ahead, you said this was a series of lectures or workshops that you were holding.
Yes.
Do you have a schedule that you can share with us maybe sometime?
Every alternate Wednesday, we'll be putting out these workshops. And we're now picking on one alternative technology every week.
7:50, 6:90.
Okay. And just to, just thinking ahead, have you worked a lot with compressed earth or rammed earth walls as well?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
And we'll be discussing that as well.
You'll be discussing that as well. Excellent. So is there some sort of a database that you have where you'll be sending out emails to all of us?
We're only in the beginning of doing it, and it is because of this lockdown situation we even came up with this idea.
Because existing shed 233
who is
233.99.
Wow. So we usually had in-house workshops every week, and because of the lockdown, it so happened that we realized that more of the kids could get involved in it, the ones who are not with us, and therefore we started doing them online. And then we said, hello, if everybody wants to participate, they can, and therefore it very inorganically, very organically started happening. So we don't really have a very good structure to it. We on our Instagram we use it to post questions, and on the basis of the answers that people have given us, we have scheduled to have certain workshops in that order.
Okay. So, I'll take a look at your Instagram.
We can get in touch, and you can maybe directly communicate with me or Saranya, and we can tell you what next. In fact, we're happy to. We will be sharing a quick feedback form with all of you, and in that we'll ask you the same question: what is the next workshop that you'd be interested in? On the basis of that, we will hold one.
Okay.
Sure. Any hands-on workshop for rammed earth construction?
We will be doing them once people are in a safer area or safer, safety, because we don't want to be taking up anything that could put anybody into any kind of jeopardy. We'll be more than happy to. Yes, Deepika.
Lavanya, thank you so much. You know what? It takes a lot from a professional to teach the other professionals like this. It was like a school where, from A to Z you have taught us. I mean, it's amazing.
I have such a teacher material, no, Deepika?
No, whatever it is, yeah. You are also a professional, right?
Oh my God.
Where, people don't want to share knowledge. You are like, amazing, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Yes, Jinal.
Since this is my first building and I wish to do filler slab, will you be able to personally guide me in while the process is on?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to. We can have a discussion in detail about that specific project of yours.
Okay, yeah.
I'll talk to you about it tomorrow for sure. Yes, Purnima.
Even I may be shortly doing one of mine. So
sure.
Hopefully
we could maybe consult you for we could consult you for some small amount of money or something like that, but we'd be happy to consult. Sure. Yeah.
Done.
Surely.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Akshay. Happy birthday again.
Bye, ma'am. It was wonderful.
Purnima. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Bye, dear.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, dear. Thank you, Guru Prasad. Thank you for joining.